What is up, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Dear Mr. Fantasy. I am your host, Nate Polvogt, here on the Player Profiler Network. Folks, it has been an exciting week. We have a lot to talk about. We've got some fantastic questions. But before we get to that, I just want to make sure that you are here on the Player Profiler Network. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. We have a ton of amazing content going off every single day. Don't miss anything that we have going on, folks. We've got the Podfather, we've got Cutter Carpentier, we've got Jack Kavanaugh hosting Player Profiler today, 7 days a week at 7 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you're tuned into all that, including Dear Mr. Fantasy here every Thursday at noon Eastern. I will be here every single week to answer your fantasy questions. If you've got questions for me, folks, you can hit me up at mailbag@rotounderworld.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Nate Polvogt. Hit me up in DMs. Just at me anywhere on Twitter. I will get your questions in the show and we'll get those read live. I want to thank everyone who's tuned in today. We've got Harry Snowman in the chat. Let's go, Nate. Thank you very much, Mr. Snowman. It's good to see you out there. Well, folks, let's just get into it. And I'm not going to beat around the bush here. We know there's some big news in the league after the franchise tag deadline on Tuesday. The first question I got here is about Lamar Jackson. This was the biggest story because we wanted to know, were they going to tag him? Were they not going to tag him? And now the question is, with the non-exclusive tag, what does he do? So where does Lamar Jackson play in 2023? Does he hold out? Where do you have him slotted in your QB rankings now? Is he still a top 8 quarterback? So we'll start with, where does he play in 2023? This is simple. We've already had 5 teams say that they have no interest in rostering Lamar Jackson or going after him. This could just be not wanting to upset your current quarterback should it not work out. However, I really truly believe these teams do not want to pay up, and they don't really want to give Lamar Jackson that much guaranteed money. He's looking for a Deshaun Watson type deal. He's also not going to hold out because he's not going to earn that deal unless he plays in 2023. This is what I see happening, folks. He's going to play in Baltimore. We've got the new system with Todd Monken as the offensive coordinator. This is going to be a wildly different offense than what we saw with Greg Roman. We know this team is likely going to try to throw the ball more often than they did the last few seasons, where they were running the ball at a 60% clip throughout the season. This isn't going to be what this team does. Lamar Jackson played in a very pro-style offense at Louisville, and it seems like Greg Roman kind of forgot that. Monken is going to get him back in the pocket, throwing the ball more often. They're going to get him receiver help, and he's going to have to rely on his legs just a little bit less often, which I think will help with his durability long-term. Now, to the question of, is he still a top 8 quarterback? Absolutely. I think that Lamar Jackson has a chance to be the overall QB1 in 2023. We've seen this man win an MVP. We know the caliber of play he's capable of. He simply hasn't had wide receivers to throw the ball to. Had Rashad Bateman until he got hurt. Then we've got Devin Duvernay. He's had Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, but that's not a lot of high caliber targets for a quarterback who we know is a very good passer. We saw it in his MVP season. He can sling the ball. He is not just a rushing quarterback. If they get him help either through the draft or through free agency, which for me, I believe is more likely to be through the draft, they might be in on a guy like Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith and Jigba. They might be in on one of these guys in the draft. They might go a little bit later in the draft. There are some great prospects available, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, but they're going to get Lamar Jackson help, folks. And because of that, I really do believe he could finish as the top quarterback in fantasy football in 2023. Maybe it's a little bit crazy. I'm throwing it out there, though. I do think it's a possibility. Do what you will with that. And we're going to move on to our next question, folks. What are your thoughts on Quentin Johnson? Well, friends, very simply, I love Quentin Johnson. I have loved Quentin Johnson since before the Combine. I loved Quentin Johnson at the back half of last season, seeing what he was doing at TCU. Shout out to my amazing wife, Jen, who pointed out the awesomeness of Quentin Johnson. I love his size. I love his physicality. 6'3", 208 pounds with good hands. That's the perfect size for a wide receiver to do what he does. He doesn't play much in the slot. He's more of an X receiver out wide, and he can compete with some of those bigger cornerbacks. However, he really is going to have to tighten up his route running at the NFL level. But overall, he's a really solid prospect. He's not going to be someone who's going to come into the league in 2023 in his rookie season and light it on fire. That's not realistic for the type of prospect he is. Even though he is going in the first round of the draft, the reason he's going so high is because there is so much potential for what he could be. He can be that big alpha receiver down the line. He's going to need some help in 2023 to get there, to get his footing in the league. But again, depending on where he lands, and all of this is dependent when it comes to rookies on where they're going to land. That makes a huge difference, because if Quentin Johnson lands in Minnesota behind Justin Jefferson and Osborne, we're not going to see a whole lot of usage for him in his rookie season. However, if he ends up somewhere where he does get a big share of targets as a wide receiver too, say somewhere like a Chicago, which is, I'll give you a very highly unlikely landing spot, or Texas with the Texans, he could see 100 plus targets in 2023. And at that end, he could be a high-end wide receiver too, if he sees that volume. Now, this seems unlikely to me, but it is within the range of outcomes for Quentin Johnson. And quite honestly, in rookie drafts, if I have a late first round pick, I'm targeting Johnson because the upside long-term, just plain and simple, is there. He seems like a guy who's durable, who can stay on the field, and who can consistently contribute to an offense, and even be someone who elevates an offense over the next few seasons. So guys, go out and get Quentin Johnson, but temper your expectations just a little bit on this fantastic prospect. All right, folks, we're going to move into our next question. And this one, I really love this because I have a lot of thoughts on the NFL Combine. And I brought some of them up last week, where this is fun, that it does showcase an athlete's physical ability, but nothing's at game speed. And that makes a difference to me. Now, we've seen all of these guys at game speed. And I actually talked a little bit about this yesterday with Luke Easterling from USA Today and John Helmkamp. This was a fantastic combine in the sense that everyone pretty much did what we thought they were going to do. There were only a handful of players that really dropped their fantasy stock, or their NFL stock for that matter, in this combine. Anthony Richardson was the first person I want to talk about in this combine who just skyrocketed his value. Most mocks had him going at the back end of the first round to like maybe some of the middle of the first round. But now we're talking about Anthony Richardson possibly being the number one overall pick. In fact, his odds currently sit at plus 380 on DraftKings. They're the third best odds for first pick. CJ Stroud obviously is, or Bryce Young is number one. I believe it's minus 180. But Anthony Richardson, he skyrocketed himself. And that was my biggest takeaway from this combine, was that. And that's the biggest change in my outlook for a player is I think Anthony Richardson may be a starting quarterback week one in the NFL. Now, we can have a debate as to whether that's a good thing for him or a bad thing. He's a fairly raw prospect. Again, the freak athleticism is there. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's quick. He performed well in every drill. He set quarterback records in the broad jump and the vertical jump. But does that translate to success at the NFL level? Eventually, yes, I do believe it does. This feels like a Malik Willis situation to me, where his stock skyrocketed at the combine. All of a sudden, everyone's talking about how talented Malik Willis is, and he will be a talented quarterback in the NFL, but not his rookie season. He needs that time, and we saw it this season when he was inserted into that Tennessee offense that he needs some time to grasp what's going on in the NFL. And maybe this isn't a fair comparison. Completely different size, completely different skill sets. And Anthony Richardson played in the SEC, whereas Malik Willis was at Liberty. However, I still think that there's a fair comparison there. Richardson probably has a quicker path to relevance in the NFL. I believe he'll be a successful starting quarterback before Malik Willis. But keep that in mind, folks. In your rookie draft, maybe if you are real quarterback needy, don't go after Anthony Richardson with your first pick if he's still on the board. The two players who really lost stock at the combine, I think everybody knows, Kayshon Boutte showed up sluggish and unathletic. Most importantly, at his size, he needs to be speedy. A 4.5 and 4.67 40 times, they're not going to do it for a running back of his stature, and that's a problem for Boutte. He's likely out of the second round, out of the third round. He might be now a late day 2 or day 3 prospect in this draft. The other one who slid a little bit is wide receiver Jordan Addison, because he had a slow 40 time, 4.49. However, given his skill set and what we know he can do on the field and his route running ability, it should be less of a concern, and I believe it is less of a concern for most NFL teams, Because again, we know how good he is. Wherever he lands in this draft, he is going to be an immediate impact wide receiver too. He has the skill set to do it. So if you're doing your rookie drafts before the actual NFL draft, don't let Jordan Addison slide because of this combine. He's going to be fine at the NFL level, folks. There really isn't much to worry about on that end. Again, Jordan Addison, to be fair, is one of my favorite prospects in this draft. I think he is going to be one of the best receivers at the end of the day that comes out of this draft. I think he's going to be up there with Quentin Johnson and Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he might even jump Quentin Johnson long term. It's hard to say. We're all just trying to forecast here, folks, getting out ahead of the season. All right, we've got some comments out here in the chat. We've got Aaron. Hello, Aaron. Thank you. It's Mr. Fantasy. Indeed, it is. We have got Richard Sickles in the chat. He says, I enjoyed watching receivers run routes at the combine, especially my favorite exercise, the gauntlet. What do you think about Josh Downs? So, folks, I didn't see Josh Downs run live. I've seen it later. I've watched kind of back some film, and I'm still going back through the combine. I like Josh Downs as a prospect. I think he's a talented receiver. He's a round 2 to round 3 guy who's going to be impactful as a wide receiver 2 slot, wide receiver 3 guy for a team pretty much out of the gate. He might be one of the more slept on prospects as far as fantasy goes in this rookie class. I'm going to be really interested to see how he does. All right, folks, we're going to get to my next question here. I have got this one. Daniel Jones and Saquon are staying in New York. Yes, they are. And that was, for me personally, I love to see that. I love to see these guys stay where they are, especially in this situation, because I think New York is a very much up-and-coming team with Brian Daboll at head coach. Now, does that make them more appealing to trade for, or do you want to see if they, more so Jones, can replicate last season's form? So I've got a few thoughts on this. We're going to start here with Daniel Jones. So as I always say, everything you do in fantasy football is 100% dependent on your roster construction and needs. Now, I think Daniel Jones is better off having stayed with New York and getting Saquon back in the backfield. And if I'm in Superflex and I need a QB2, I'm absolutely fine going after Jones. However, I'm not fine paying up for him. I'm comfy giving up a late second or early third round pick or a veteran that maybe this other person needs for their roster for depth or for security. But I'm not going farther than that because, to be realistic, he's no more than a QB2, maybe a mid to back end QB2, where there's value there and he could pop ahead of that. But I wouldn't bet on it, at least not this season. Now with Saquon, I'm totally comfortable going after Saquon, so much so I would give up a first round pick. And here's why. I know he's an older running back in terms of older running backs, but Saquon is very talented, and he had a year where he sat. Now, granted, it was due to injury, but that also reduces wear and tear on the knees, on the legs, on the hips, on the shoulders, on the whole body overall. So I think he has 2, 3, 4 more solid fantasy seasons. Now, when we're talking 3 and 4, we're probably talking more of like an RB2 or a flex, but that's still valuable on your roster. And giving up a first isn't that big of a deal to me, because what else are you going to get if you're running back needy? You're going to get Bijan or you're going to get Jahmyr Gibbs. And that's great. And those guys have fantastic long-term value. But if you want to win now, getting Saquon is not a bad move. This isn't bad for Saquon to be back in New York, be back in a system where we know they're going to run the ball. Daniel Jones is very mobile. We saw him use his legs. He's not talked enough about as a rushing quarterback, which is the thing that could get Daniel Jones into that QB1 tier in 2023, though I'm not going to die on that hill, not even remotely close, folks. Okay, well, we have got through 4 questions. And I just want to remind you guys of our awesome partner, Sleeper Fantasy Football. Sleeper.app is amazing. And right now, it's not football season, but they have some amazing over-under competitions going on. And if you sign up today with the code UNDERWORLD, they will match $100, up to $100 of your first deposit. Folks, it's free money. It would be silly not to get on Sleeper. And if you're not already on Sleeper, it's the best fantasy sports platform out there. Get over there today, check it out, sign up with the code UNDERWORLD, and get $100 with your $100 deposit on Sleeper. All right, folks, we're going to move into our last couple of questions here. And this is a great question, and this is something I have been thinking about since Derek Carr was announced to be leaving the Raiders. and where he was going to land. And we've talked about a bunch of different landing spots. Ultimately, he ended up with the New Orleans Saints, as we know. Now, is a change of scenery going to boost Derek Carr, or are we in for Andy Dalton 2.0? Well, Derek Carr's not going to set the world on fire. We all know that. Derek Carr is what Derek Carr is. He's a middle-of-the-road, adequate quarterback who's likely going to finish in the middle of the QB2 tier in most formats. Makes him viable in Superflex, of course, or if you need a quarterback for a bye week in one QB formats, that's fine. What concerns me, though, about Derek Carr in New Orleans is that we're staring down the barrel of no Alvin Kamara for possibly half of the season, and if he gets jail time, we're not going to see Alvin Kamara back with the Saints in 2023. If we ever see him on the field again, that's another conversation. We're going to know more in June. But look, this has me down on Carr even in that QB2 range. What I'm afraid of is without that safety blanket of a rushing game, he's going to be even worse than he was in 2022. Now, he seemed serviceable in 2022, but it was his worst season since his rookie season. He had his lowest completion percentage and just looked, with the weapons he had, didn't look great. And now we're going to have him on a Saints offense that, yes, he's got Chris Olave, but what are they going to do at running back? If he doesn't have that solid running game behind him, this is going to be a mess. And Dennis Allen is a borderline competent coach, and I'll say borderline and not really even believe he's borderline. I don't think he's a competent coach, but we're going to see what happens in New Orleans. Maybe Derek Carr and his attitude in the locker room elevates this team, and they're in a really weak division in the NFC South. So, folks, anything is possible when it comes to Derek Carr. Another Derek Carr related question, and this is going to round us out today. Unless anybody in the chat has questions, please drop them in there. I will happily get to them before we get out of here today. The Jets bailed on signing Derek Carr, signaling they're likely all in on trading for Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, they sent a full contingent to LA 2 days ago to speak with him. It was Woody Johnson, Robert Saleh, Nathaniel Hackett, and Joe Douglas. They sent everyone to try and woo Aaron Rodgers. Now, in all likelihood, it seems like a deal does get done here. However, that said, what if they don't land him? What is the Jets' plan B? Well, we just talked about Andy Dalton. He's going to be out there and around. Jameis Winston would be an option for the Jets. Wouldn't we love to see him gunning the ball to Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore? And he could have a running game with Breece Hall once Breece Hall is back. That would be an interesting scenario. They could go back to the well with Zach Wilson and try that out again. Maybe he's a year more mature and a year better, and he's learned and can be a contributing member of this team, not be so whiny, maybe use his arm and be more intelligent on the field. But that seems unlikely. It seems like a team that has given up on Zach Wilson. So to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know what the Jets' plan B is. I think this is a situation where the New York Jets don't have a plan B. I think that they're throwing it all on the table. It's much like when John Elway went after Peyton Manning. I remember it very specifically. He was asked a question in the media, what if this doesn't work out? What's your plan B? And John Elway simply said, there is no plan B. Didn't elaborate, didn't go any further. This is, I think, where Douglas, Johnson, Saleh, and Hackett are. I think they're at a point where they're all in on this. I really, truly believe that they paid Nathaniel Hackett because they want him to lure Aaron Rodgers. We'll see how it all plays out, but I really do think they don't have a plan B. They're all in on this Aaron Rodgers business, and it's sounding to me more and more like this is something that's probably going to happen. We're going to see Aaron Rodgers follow the Brett Favre path. Maybe he ends his career in Minnesota. Maybe you should start placing bets on Jordan Love going to the New York Jets sometime in the future, because this seems to be the pattern from Green Bay Packers quarterbacks. It's going to be interesting to see how all of this early stuff plays out, folks. We have got a long offseason ahead of us, and I will be here with you every single Thursday to answer your questions and get you into those championships. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Player Profiler for more fire content. Folks, I will see you next Thursday.